They said the trial would be fair, but from the moment she stepped into the courthouse with dust on her hem, and no one by her side, it was clear to everyone justice had already left town. The saloon emptied early that day. Even the gamblers put down their cards to head toward the courthouse, drawn by the scent of scandal and the promise of a spectacle. A woman on trial for murder. A servant girl. Quiet, poor, alone. It wasn't the crime that drew them. It was who she was, or rather who she wasn't. She had no husband to speak for her, no father to defend her name. She had no name that anyone remembered, really. Folks just called her the girl at the mayor's house, or that quiet one with the eyes that don't blink enough. She had worked in the home of Mayor Elwood Thatcher, a man as rich as he was cruel. And now he was dead, poisoned, they said, and she was the only one left in the room when he died. She didn't cry when they dragged her out of that big house in chains. She didn't plead or scream or protest her innocence. She looked down, walked straight, and let them spit and curse her name. Now she sat on the bench beside a rusted iron stove, her hands folded, her hair pulled back into a tight bun that revealed the bruises still fading beneath her jaw. The prosecutor paced like a preacher in Sunday fire, waving a small bottle in his hand. "This here," he shouted, "is belladonna, the devil's herb. A single drop can kill a man in his sleep, and that's just what she did." The crowd hissed, murmured, nodded. No one asked why the bottle was found in the mayor's own drawer. No one mentioned that he had grown weaker for months before that night. No one asked what a servant girl, who hadn't even a pair of decent shoes, would gain from killing the only man who paid her. The judge, an old friend of the deceased, watched with the detachment of a man balancing loyalty and duty, and leaning hard toward the former. Her court-appointed attorney hadn't said much all morning. He wiped his forehead, cleared his throat, then finally stood. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I don't believe there's any real proof." "That's all," the judge interrupted. "You may sit down." A few people chuckled. She didn't. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, not looking for help, just watching how quickly people turned cruel when they had nothing to lose. An old woman from the bakery turned her face away. A stable boy who used to smile at her now avoided her gaze. And the sheriff, who once asked her if she needed protection from her master, now stood by the door like she was already guilty. The jury didn't deliberate that day. They didn't need to. Everyone already had their version of the truth, and none of them included mercy. As the gavel slammed down, and the judge called for a break before sentencing, the woman was led out through the back hallway. She didn't resist. But across the town, in the shadows of a nearly empty saloon, a man with grey dust on his coat and a revolver heavy on his hip sat without touching his drink. He'd been there since dawn, and when he heard the gavel echo across the wooden buildings of Hollow Rock, he stood. They called it justice, but it felt more like theater. When the trial resumed after a brief recess, the townsfolk returned to their seats with renewed energy. Some clutched fans, others snacks, as if they were back at the Opera House in Abilene. Only this show had no music, just the slow unraveling of a life no one thought much about until now. The woman was led back into the courtroom in chains that clinked like wind chimes in a storm. Her face was pale, unreadable. She didn't speak. She hadn't since the arrest. The prosecutor leaned in again, feeding the flames. He told stories of a bitter servant, scorned by a master who tolerated her presence out of Christian charity. He painted her as jealous, secretive, resentful, the kind of woman who looked like she was always listening, but never said a word. "She never even cried at the mayor's death," he said, his voice rising. "What kind of woman doesn't weep when her employer dies in her arms?" Someone in the back whispered, "A guilty one." No one questioned how a woman who earned $2 a week could afford poison. No one asked why Mayor Thatcher's will had been hastily rewritten the week before, leaving nothing to his estranged sons and everything to a mysterious benefactor whose name hadn't yet been disclosed. The court-appointed defense said nothing. He was a man who valued his place in the town more than the truth. His voice, when it came, was apologetic, almost embarrassed. "There's no direct proof," he offered, barely audible. "Perhaps we should consider, well, it could have been a mistake. Maybe it was a heart condition." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwell," the judge cut in. "We've heard enough speculation." The girl didn't flinch. She had grown used to silence. When she was 8, her mother died in childbirth, and her father drank himself into the ground before she turned 12. After that, life taught her to disappear. Walk quietly, speak less, smile only when expected. She lived in 5 houses before ending up in Mayor Thatcher's mansion, each one more cruel than the last. And Thatcher was no exception. His kindness was poison masked as propriety. He called her girl, no matter how many birthdays passed. His hands lingered when they shouldn't. He struck her once for breaking a porcelain dish, then paid her extra the next day, said it was for her troubles. In private, he was dangerous. In public, he was a pillar. That made her the liar. She had considered running once, but run where? Who would take her in? What man would believe a word she said about Mayor Elwood Thatcher? None of it mattered now. The judge cleared his throat and looked over the courtroom with the tired eyes of a man who just wanted to go home. "Unless there are any final witnesses," he began. The courtroom stilled. The doors creaked. No one entered. "Not yet." The judge nodded. "Then this court finds the defendant." Before he could finish, someone burst through the courthouse doors, panting. It was the town stable boy, his hat missing, his shirt soaked in sweat. He stumbled in, clutching something in his hand. "I found this," he shouted, holding up a crumpled letter. "It's from the mayor. I found it in his desk drawer, tucked behind the lining." Gasps filled the room. The judge waved the bailiff forward. The letter was snatched and handed up. The courtroom held its breath. The judge read in silence. Then he closed the letter, set it down slowly, and glanced at the jury. "It changes nothing," he said coldly. "The letter is unsigned and unverified. We proceed." And just like that, the hope vanished. The girl didn't look up. She had learned long ago that the truth was not welcome in certain rooms, and this was one of them. The courtroom emptied as dusk settled over Hollow Rock. The trial was adjourned for the night, but no one expected surprises in the morning. The girl, still nameless to most, would be declared guilty, sentenced, and forgotten. The town had already moved on to supper and stories. She was returned to a narrow holding cell behind the sheriff's office. The cot smelled of mildew, the walls were cold stone, and the only window was a small slit above eye level, barely enough to see the sky. Still, she sat upright, back straight, hands folded in her lap. No one visited. No one brought her food. Even the sheriff, who once tipped his hat at her in town, avoided her gaze now. His deputy, young, red-haired, still green, watched her from a distance, like she was some caged animal that might snap at any moment. She didn't snap. She didn't speak. She just waited. In town, the conversations continued without her. At the saloon, over whiskey and laughter, the regulars repeated the prosecutor's words with certainty. At the church, they prayed for justice, though whether that meant punishment or mercy, no one really knew. And at the Thatcher house, the mayor's sons gathered to discuss their inheritance. No one spoke on her behalf, not the housemaid who saw the bruises, not the cook who heard the arguments, not the doctor who had treated Thatcher's failing heart, but stayed silent when asked to testify. No one. They all had something to lose, or so they told themselves. Their jobs, their peace, their place in a town that rewarded silence more than ever did truth. But the girl had nothing left to lose, and so she sat quietly in that cell, remembering every night she had gone to bed hungry while the mayor dined with guests. Every morning she'd scrubbed the floor, only to be told she'd missed a spot. Every time she'd flinched at the sound of footsteps behind her, too scared to turn around. She had accepted that this town would never remember her kindness, only the rumor of her crime. And then, just before midnight, The door to the sheriff's office creaked open. Boots, heavy, deliberate. The deputy stood, hand to his holster. A figure stepped in. Dusty coat, low-brimmed hat, revolver resting easy on his hip. "Can I help you?" the deputy asked, voice cracking. The man didn't answer. He walked to the cell and stopped a few feet away. She looked up for the first time. Her eyes narrowed. Recognition flickered, but only for a second. He tipped his hat. "Evening," he said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "Didn't expect to find you behind bars." She said nothing. "I came for answers," he added. "But seems I came for something more." The deputy cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, visiting hours ere." The man turned his head. The deputy froze. The silence returned. Finally, the stranger looked back at her and spoke softly. "I'll be at the saloon come morning. If you want out of this, I suggest you wait." Then he turned and left, door swinging behind him. The girl didn't sleep that night. Not because she feared what was coming, but because, for the first time, someone had walked into her silence and stayed a while. By sunrise, whispers began to float across hollow rock like the morning mist. "He's back," murmured the bartender as he wiped the same glass 3 times over. "Didn't think I'd ever see that bastard again." "Who?" asked the piano player, though his hands froze above the keys. The bartender leaned in and lowered his voice. "Cole Maddox." The name sent a chill down the saloon's spine. Cole Maddox wasn't just a man. He was a legend, the kind mothers used to warn their boys about when they thought of joining posses or chasing outlaws. He'd once been the fastest draw west of the Black Hills, a bounty hunter, a drifter, a shadow, but he disappeared years ago. Some said he was dead. Others said he'd gone mad. A few swore they'd seen him ride into a storm and vanish like smoke. But now he was back, and he was sitting in the corner of the saloon, hat down low, nursing a single cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The townsfolk kept their distance. Even the sheriff, when he passed by, pretended not to notice the revolver at Cole's side, or the way his eyes watched everything without ever moving. Nobody approached, nobody dared, except the old pianist. He shuffled toward the corner, hands shaking just enough to betray his nerves. "You give for her?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Cole didn't look up. "I'm here because I owe a debt." The pianist nodded, though he didn't understand. "Folks say she did it." "Folks say a lot of things," Cole replied, calm and low. "She ain't said a word in her own defense." "That's 'cause nobody ever listened when she did." The old man looked around as if afraid of who might be listening now. "You planning to speak for her?" Cole finally lifted his eyes. Cold, clear, certain. "I plan to make this town remember what happens when it forgets who it used to be." Back at the sheriff's office, the girl stood by the barred window, arms folded. She hadn't been told anything about the stranger who came in the night, but she remembered his voice, his silence, and something deeper, something like the echo of a life she once might have had if things had gone differently. She remembered a name. Not his name. Not yet. But a name she had overheard once, long ago, through the walls of Mayor Thatcher's study. "Cole Maddox is a necessary evil," the mayor had grunted. "He kills, but he doesn't steal. He protects, but only if paid in blood." That name had lingered in the corners of her mind ever since. The name of the man Thatcher had once hired to scare off a rival. A man who vanished after one bloody night that no one dared discuss. A man who now sat waiting, not far from the courthouse. The town tailor turned the sign on his door to tJudgeByLooks. At the bakery, the owner burned the morning loaves, distracted by what he saw outside. A stranger in a dark coat, walking toward the square. At the saloon, the bartender poured another drink with a trembling hand. The town had spoken her guilt before a verdict had ever been read. But now, a name they had buried deep had come back to life, and it carried judgment of its own. The sun climbed higher, but the usual bustle of Hollow Rock slowed to a cautious crawl. The saloon should have been alive by midday, filled with chatter and clinking glasses. Instead, it sat in a strange hush, like the whole town was holding its breath. Only the swinging doors creaked as people peeked in, glanced at the man in the corner, and chose to leave quietly. Cole Maddox hadn't moved since dawn. He sat in the far booth, his hat shadowing his face, hands resting atop the table, close, but not too close, to the revolver holstered at his side. He hadn't ordered another drink. He hadn't eaten. He just waited. The piano stayed silent. The bartender polished glasses that didn't need polishing. Every now and then, someone would enter, curious, brave, or stupid, and stop dead at the sight of him. A few whispered his name, only to be silenced by a glare from those who remembered what he was capable of. By noon, the sheriff himself stepped inside. He walked slowly, shoulders stiff beneath his badge, trying to look like the law still held weight. "Maddox," he said with a nod. Cole didn't respond. "You passing through?" Silence. The sheriff cleared his throat. "We don't want any trouble." "Then stop making it," Cole replied, low and even. The sheriff shifted. "If this is about the girl, it is. She was tried fair and square." Cole looked up, eyes sharp. "Nothing about that town is fair, least of all that courtroom." The sheriff opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wasn't a cruel man, just a tired one, worn down by years of looking away. And Cole Maddox wasn't the kind of ghost you argued with. "I ain't here to break your law," Cole said, voice like steel drawn slow. "Just here to remind it." The sheriff gave a single nod and walked out, tension trailing behind him like smoke. Back in the cell, the girl sat on her cot, head bowed. She heard the whispers through the walls, the way voices trembled when they said his name. She remembered how Thatcher used to speak of Cole Maddox, like a weapon he once owned but lost control of. She remembered one night years ago, when Thatcher had shouted at her for asking too many questions. Cole had been in the room, silent as always. After that, the shouting stopped for weeks. And then one morning, Cole was gone. Now he was here again. The town didn't know what to do with his presence. He was too dangerous to provoke, too mysterious to trust, and too quiet to dismiss. He didn't make threats. He didn't raise his voice. But something about his stillness unsettled everyone. Even the air seemed to lean away from him. As the courthouse bell rang 1 o'clock, the doors of the saloon swung wide. The room stiffened. Cole stood. Every eye followed him as he walked slowly to the door, spurs barely making a sound on the wooden floor. He paused once, just before leaving, then turned to face the room. "Today you'll all watch a woman hang for something she didn't do," he said. And not one of you lifted a hand. No one answered. He didn't wait for one. He walked out, and behind him, silence deeper than gunfire settled over Hollow Rock. The courthouse filled early. Men took off their hats. Women clutched their shawls. Children, dragged along by curiosity, were told to hush and watch. The trial had ended the day before. All that remained now was the sentencing. The judge sat high in his chair, robes pressed, voice already rehearsed. He had a Bible on the bench, though everyone knew it hadn't been opened in years. The jury had returned their guilty verdict before supper the night prior, and now the town awaited the formal sealing of a fate they had already accepted. The girl was led in, still chained, still silent. She wore the same simple dress from the day of her arrest. It hung loose on her shoulders now. Her cheeks were hollow, eyes darkened by sleepless nights. She looked less like a criminal and more like a shadow trying to remember what it meant to be seen. She was told to stand. She did. "Do you have any final words?" The judge asked, more out of procedure than genuine concern. She shook her head. Then the judge began the sentence. His words were heavy and ornate, full of legal weight and biblical references, as if poetry could mask the ugliness beneath it. He spoke of justice, of the sanctity of life, of how this court does not take pleasure in such decisions. And then the door opened. The heavy creak stole every eye in the room. Footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, echoing through the wooden chamber like distant thunder. Cole Maddox stepped inside. The judge paused mid-sentence. The sheriff rose halfway, then sat back down. The girl didn't turn. She didn't have to. She knew. Cole walked straight down the center aisle. No one dared stop him. No one even whispered his name. He reached the front and stood just behind her. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain his rhythm. This court finds the defendant guilty. She's my wife, Cole said. The words dropped like a hammer on stone. Gasps swept the room. A child whimpered. Someone in the back whispered, "That can't be true." The judge narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" Cole's voice remained even calm. "I said she's my wife." "You're interrupting official court business." "I'm correcting it." The judge tried to assert authority. "This is a court of law, sir, not a saloon for storytelling." "Then let the truth speak," Cole said. He reached into his coat, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a folded paper. Marriage license, filed in Dust Creek, 3 towns over. 2 years ago. The sheriff, pale and sweating, walked forward and took the document. He read it once, then twice. He looked at the girl. She showed no emotion, only blinked. The judge scoffed. "Even if this is true, and I doubt it, it has no bearing on her guilt." "It has bearing on why she was left alone," Cole answered. "Why no one stood beside her." He turned to the crowd. "You watched her suffer, and you did nothing." No one met his gaze. The judge, flustered, slammed the gavel once. "This is highly irregular." Cole stepped closer to the girl and said quietly, "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in the entire trial, her hands shook. She wasn't crying, but something had cracked in her stillness. Not broken, just opened. For several seconds, the entire courtroom stood still. The gavel rested crooked on the judge's bench, unused since Cole Maddox had spoken. The sheriff held the marriage license like it might catch fire in his hands. And the jury, so firm in their judgment just hours ago, now stared at the woman as if seeing her for the very first time. She remained quiet, but her stillness had changed. No longer the quiet of a woman abandoned, now the quiet of a woman under protection. The judge leaned forward, trying to regain control. "Even if this marriage is valid, it doesn't absolve her of murder. This trial is about justice, not romance." Cole stepped forward once. Just once. That was enough. "I'm not here for romance," he said. "I'm here because you lied. All of you." Murmurs rippled across the benches. "She begged for help before the mayor died," Cole said. "I was there. I heard her. I saw the bruises. I saw how he kept her working through fever, through injury. I left because I couldn't kill a man for something the law should have stopped." He looked around, voice low and sharp. "But you never stopped it. You watched. You gossiped. And now you call yourselves just." The judge's face turned red. "You're not an officer of this court. You have no authority here." "I don't need authority," Cole replied. "I have truth." He turned to the sheriff. "You remember that cut on her lip? You saw it. You asked if she wanted to press charges." The sheriff swallowed hard and nodded slowly. "She said no. Said it would only make things worse." "She was right," Cole added. "Because it did." The judge tried again to interrupt, but this time Cole spoke first. "I came back not to rescue her, but to remind you what you buried." He pulled another paper from his coat. An old medical report, signed by the town doctor. The bruises, the broken rib, the internal bleeding. A year before, more gasps. The document passed from hand to hand, finally reaching the judge, who read it in silence. She wasn't angry, Cole said. She was surviving. He turned to her then, not the town, not the court. Just her. "You wanted to disappear so bad, you forgot you mattered." She looked up, her eyes locking with his. "I left because I thought it was better to disappear than to stay and burn everything down," she said. "I was wrong." The courtroom held its breath. Then a voice rose from the back. Thin, shaking. "I saw the mayor hit her," said the baker's wife. Heads turned. "He used to make her kneel while he drank," she added, now crying. "I never said anything." Then the housemaid stood. "She cleaned his chamber pot when she had a fever. I begged him to let her rest." He laughed. Then the old piano man spoke. "I saw the bruises on her arms 2 years ago. I thought it wasn't my place." The courtroom shifted. Whispers of guilt and shame grew louder than any gavel could silence. The judge sat back, expression hollow. The truth was heavier than the sentence he was about to deliver. Cole didn't need to say another word. He had already won, not through violence, but through silence finally broken. The courthouse emptied slowly. No verdict was read that day, no sentence delivered. Instead, the judge, once so proud in posture, rose and announced a recess pending further review of new evidence and witness accounts. His voice cracked as he said it, like he no longer believed in the courtroom he commanded. The girl was taken back to her cell, but this time without shackles. The deputy who led her there kept his head down, and his hands trembled slightly when he opened the iron door. She didn't ask questions. She just sat quietly. Across town, Cole Maddox stood at the edge of the square, staring into the distance. He didn't go back to the saloon, didn't seek a meal or a bed. He waited. And as he waited, people passed, some pausing, unsure whether to thank him, others pretending not to see him at all. By nightfall, the doctor arrived at the sheriff's office, a file in hand and guilt written across his face. "I lied by omission," he confessed. "I treated her more than once, and I never filed the proper records. I feared the mayor's wrath more than I feared God." The sheriff, his voice quieter than usual, simply said, "You're not the only one." The next morning, the town was different. No one said it aloud, but the name Cole Maddox now carried weight again. Not as an outlaw, not as a killer, but as something worse for Hollow Rock. A mirror, a reminder of everything they chose not to see. Cole sat outside the jailhouse, hat low over his eyes, as people walked by and whispered his name, not with fear, but with unease. It wasn't his gun they feared anymore. It was what he knew. Inside, the girl remained still, but her thoughts raced. She remembered the first time she heard Cole's name, whispered by the mayor during an argument with a rival. "I'll bring Maddox back if you don't shut your mouth," Thatcher had said, like invoking the devil. Later, she'd heard the staff speak of Cole with reverence and fear. A man who did what needed doing, but not unless it was right. A gun for hire, yes, but one who had rules of his own. She had seen him only a few times then. Quiet, watchful. A man who never looked at her like she was invisible. But he disappeared, just like that. Now he was back and claiming her as his wife. She didn't understand why. She didn't even know if it was true. But part of her, the part that hadn't dared feel anything for years, wanted to believe it could be that someone somewhere had seen her long before the courtroom did. Back outside, the sheriff approached Cole. "Judge's call for the case to be reopened," he said. "With proper testimony, witnesses." Cole didn't move. Too little too late. Maybe. The sheriff hesitated, then added, "You really married her." Cole shrugged. "It doesn't matter." "Matters to some of us." Cole stood. "Let the town do what it needs to. But make sure when it's done she walks free. And you? I'll be gone by then." The sheriff didn't stop him, just nodded. As Cole turned away, a voice rose behind him. Small, steady. "She deserves more than freedom." He turned. The piano man stood in the square, old and bent, but eyes clear. "She deserves a place, a name, something that lasts longer than shame." Cole tipped his hat. Then maybe it's time Hollow Rock remembered who it used to be. The reopening of the trial was announced by the ringing of the church bell, not by law, but by the will of the people. No official document declared it. No public notice posted. But the town came anyway. They came because they had seen something they hadn't expected. Truth that didn't scream, didn't threaten, didn't beg. Just stood its ground and stared back at them with hollow eyes and bruised wrists. They came because the girl no longer seemed like a stranger. She seemed like someone they had failed. The church opened its doors because the courthouse could no longer be trusted. The pews filled slowly. First the baker and his wife. Then the housemaid. Then the cook. The piano man. The stable boy. Each one taking their place as if to say, "We were wrong." Cole Maddox didn't sit. He stood near the back, arms crossed, watching. She entered with the sheriff. No chains this time. No bowed head. Her steps were still cautious, but her spine was straight. And when she sat on the witness bench, something changed. She spoke for the first time since her arrest. "I didn't kill him," she said. Her voice was soft, but it held. "I wanted to, many times, but I didn't." She looked around the room, not in anger, but with a kind of sadness that made grown men shift in their seats. "I begged for help. I prayed. I stayed silent because I thought it would keep me safe." She turned toward the judge, now seated without robes, a man like any other. It didn't. One by one, the townsfolk came forward. The maid testified to the mayor's temper. The cook spoke of long nights the girl went without food. The stable boy confirmed he saw the mayor strike her more than once. Even the judge, shamed by what he had seen and allowed, admitted he had known the rumors but never asked questions. By the end of the day, the verdict was not read aloud. There was no need. The truth had returned, not in fury, but in faith. In the belief that redemption, though slow, still had a place in the West. Outside, the sun dipped low. Cole waited at the edge of town, horse saddled, coat draped over one shoulder. She found him there. "I don't remember marrying you," she said plainly. "You didn't," he answered. She blinked. "The papers are real, but they were never filed." "Why bring them?" "Because they'd believe me before they believe you." She studied him. "So you lied for me?" "No," he said. "I lied with you." A breeze caught the hem of her dress. "You can stay," he added. She hesitated. "And be your wife." "You don't owe me that," he said. "You don't owe me anything." He turned, ready to mount, but she stopped him with one word. "Wait," he paused. "I don't want to stay in Hollow Rock," she said. "But I don't want to walk alone anymore." He met her gaze, and for the first time in years, she saw something in a man's eyes that didn't ask anything of her, only offered a place to rest. She stepped forward. He offered his hand. And together, they turned away from the town that had once called her nothing. They didn't ride far, just far enough that Hollow Rock faded behind them, swallowed by dust and the setting sun. No destination spoken, no plans laid out, just two souls moving forward. Quietly, steadily, without chains. At dusk, they stopped at a roadside inn just beyond the ridge. A wooden sign creaked in the wind, the letters faded but still legible. Mercy's Rest. Inside, the tavern was nearly empty. A single lantern lit the room in amber glow. An old woman behind the counter looked up as they entered, eyes sharp, then softened when she saw the girl's face. "Room's yours if you want it," the woman said. No questions. Cole nodded and paid. They sat near the fire, not close but not far. He ordered food, nothing fancy, just stew and cornbread. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd eaten a real meal. Not since before the arrest, maybe not even before that. She sat with her hands folded in her lap until the food arrived. Then slowly, she reached for the spoon. Cole didn't watch her. He just ate. No words, no questions, no expectations. But when she finished half the bowl, he glanced over. "Want the rest?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, thank you." He pushed his bowl toward her anyway. She hesitated, then took a bite. And in that small gesture, something unspoken passed between them. A truce, a beginning. Not love, not yet, maybe not ever, but something solid, something true. She set down the spoon and leaned back. You really were going to leave after the trial? She asked. Yes. Why? Because I didn't think you'd want a reminder of that place. She studied him in the firelight. Maybe I don't, but I do want something to look forward to. Cole didn't smile. He rarely did, but his eyes softened. What do you want? He asked. She looked down at her hands, once so steady, now trembling just enough to feel real. A place I can walk into without hearing whispers, she said. A name I can speak without shame. He nodded. And a table, she added. That made him pause. A table? One where someone saves me a seat, where I don't have to earn it. Cole reached across the table, not to touch her, but to straighten the spoon that had gone crooked. Then we'll build that, he said. No promises, no vows, just truth. The old woman behind the counter brought them tea without asking. She'd seen many travelers pass through, but few with eyes so tired and quiet. As the fire crackled low, the girl looked out the window. The stars had come out. She wasn't anyone's servant anymore. She wasn't the girl with no name. She was someone who had stood trial alone and walked away with someone who saw her, not as broken, but as beginning. And that night, in a place called Mercy's Rest, two souls shared a table built not from woody trees, but from silence, survival, and something that might one day be called love. Sometimes all a person needs is for someone to say, "You're not alone." Sometimes the most powerful statement is expectations. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and join our community of viewers who appreciate stories of quiet strength and unexpected talent. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from our global audience. Everyday people are underestimated based on appearance, gender, or background. Have you ever been in a situation where you surprised others with your hidden talents? Share your experiences in the comments. And remember, the most powerful skill isn't just expertise, but the quiet confidence to stand your ground when others doubt you. Until next time.